Good afternoon, everyone. Appreciate the opportunity to present the update on Dyadic International as we have next generation proteins for world health. This is our safe harbor statement. Our mission at Dyadic is to develop proteins for world health. So we're meeting the growing demands for proteins worldwide for human and animal health with highly productive, scalable microbial biomanufacturing platforms. Our technology is helping to improve how we feed, fuel, and heal the world by utilizing modern biotech to revolutionize science, medicine, agriculture, nutrition, and food. And I think you'll find some of the new areas that we're just beginning to, it's kind of like back to the future, back to the industrial space in some way. We'll get into that coming up. What I think I want you to point out that platform technologies are misunderstood. It's kind of like the picks and shovels of the gold industry. You know, they made the money, but the people mined the gold, and very few people actually got the gold out of the mines, or the ones that did, it wasn't profitable. You know, Merck paid $400 million for glycophi back in 2006 for a yeast cell. In 2011, you see J&J bought Crucell for $2.4 billion. 2017, Sanofi paid $750 million for the baculovirus expression system. When you remember that word, baculovirus expression system, because we make things at about 100 to 300 times greater yield in shorter time at lower cost without having to remove viruses. And then Ligand, just a few years ago, purchased Phoenix for over $500 million for a microbial E. coli or a bacterial system. Our journey's been a long and tedious one, but it's been very successful and favorable to, you can see here, we started in 1992. We were in the industrial biotech space for about 25 years, sold that business to DuPont for $75 million after licensing it to BASF, Shell Oil, Abengoa Bioenergy for around $30 million before that. So totally generating about $107 million of non-dilutive capital. And then we pivoted to focus on pharmaceuticals because we felt we can completely transform the industry, kind of the Elon Musk of the biomanufacturing business. And today you'll see that I think we've actually, 5 years later, we've re-engineered this cell line to make things quicker, faster, cheaper, and completely flexible commercial scales. We make things with very high purity, very high productivity, robustness, versatility, speed, we'll get into some of that, and of course low cost. Because a vaccine or a drug that's not affordable or accessible is 100% ineffective. One of the problems we all experience, and you hear about it every day, supply chain, material and equipment. So if you had developed a technology that uses, let's say, raw materials that you couldn't get your hands on, like bags, like plastic bags for single-use bioreactors, versus having a stainless steel or the media or some other adjuvant that you couldn't get, you just basically shut down your manufacturing process in the middle of the pandemic. Our technology is readily accessible to the raw materials. It's flexible in terms of stainless steel and or single-use bioreactors. And it's not complex. The manufacturing process is simple. We developed it for the industrial world to be able to make a lot of something very cheap at very large scale with very low cost media. And we don't have capacity constraints. We can develop cell lines very quickly to produce more for less for all the different treatments or therapeutics that are out there being developed. And this is an example. When we started and moved from the industrial biotech space to the pharmaceutical industry, we weren't sure if this highly productive cell would be able to produce a monoclonal antibody with the right form, with the right qualities, antigens with the right properties, with the right benefits that would produce neutralizing antibodies to protect you from viruses. And if you go through the slide, you can see Fabs and MADs and bispecifics. We were able to produce virtually everything we tried. Some of them were perfect, some weren't. And the ones that weren't, we worked on to figure out how to make the quality of those products better over the last 5 years. And so here's an example of a slide. Here's slide number 9, where we spent over the last year and a half, 2 years. You can see the diversity, the breadth, the scope, and the depth of the things that we made. So you can imagine enabling biopharma companies and biotech companies, governmental agencies, and academia with a new way to make proteins quicker, faster, develop them, produce them, provide them to a global population, In this slide, for example, for COVID-19, we didn't just make Wuhan, the original viral strain or antigen. We made alpha, we made beta, we made gamma, we made delta, we made omicron. Why did we do that? We did that because we can make proteins in larger amounts. We didn't have to do dose sparing. We can produce more for less. We can do it at flexible commercial scale, and we can blend these. So we have stable cell lines of all of these. But we didn't just make that. We worked on seasonal flu with, Oslo University to support the work from Sanofi, rabies, and a variety of other things on the antigen side. And you can see here we also worked on the neutralizing antibodies for infectious disease. And we'll talk about one of those coming up, but you can see the variety of things we made. On the next slide, slide number 10, basically this platform is being applied today to make vaccines, therapeutic proteins like Fabs and MABs and bispecifics, and then proteins and enzymes for nutrition and food, which is a new area, which is kind of like back to the future because we were making enzymes and other proteins for the industrial sector when we'd sold our business to DuPont. But now that that non-compete has ended, we've had people reaching back to us and we're opportunistically applying the technology in that space as well. But our main focus here is on human and animal health. We have a phase 1 clinical trial, we hope, to start this fall. We're working on the final details, getting ready to file the regulatory documents in South Africa. We're working with Janssen Pharmaceutical, which is part of J&J, one of the top 5 pharmaceutical industries, with a fully funded project on 2 different molecules that has the potential for milestone payments in the 7 figures and ultimately commercial payments per product in the 9 figures. 9 figures means 100 million plus. So that's per product. So if those work out, there'd be a lot of money coming in at the right time to help us either with a milestone, development milestones, or the commercial product in the end. In addition to that, we're advancing and expanding multiple antigens for infectious disease for ourselves and other people. And of course, on the monoclonal antibodies for human health, we'll get into that later. So one of the things that we had to do is develop the cell line over the last 5 years to make it perfect fit to make monoclonal antibodies, and I'm going to talk about that later. Animal health, we've announced we have a deal with Phibro. Phibro is one of the top 10 animal health companies in the world. They fully funded a program. They've already run 2 stages of animal trials, moving now towards regulatory. And they've now initiated a new project with us, which is about to start as a second project. We're in touch with and having meetings with at Bio next week with 3 out of the top 4 animal health companies to see what and if and where we can maybe apply this technology to benefit those companies as well. And we spent 5 years before the pandemic in the Zoonosis Anticipation Preparative Initiative, preparing for pandemics, and we were ready, and we have, I think, the right technology at the right time. Nutrition and food, strategic partners with Global Food Ingredient Company, which we announced about a month ago. We've developed C1 cell lines, how to produce cannabinoids, and a primary and secondary metabolite that we'll be announcing short time this year. So one of the benefits we have here is that we can make things very quickly. So you can see from this slide, on slide 12, within 7 weeks, we can take a gene sequence, have a stable cell line, and it's not only having the cell line at this point, we're producing the protein, we've purified the protein, and we can take it into an animal study. So we can start preclinical trials or use those cell lines to go into potential cGMP manufacturing in a very rapid pace. And the beautiful thing there is not only can we do it rapidly, that cell line pumps out a lot of product. So we can do things at much larger scale, much lower cost for a greater percentage of the population on a global basis. And we've been working here with the University of Oslo on a mice trial that we've done now for hemagglutinin. We'll talk about another aspect of that antigen as well for seasonal flu. And there's publication you can read on that on our website under the Media Center under Scientific Publications. On slide number 13, we have established collaborations with, as I mentioned, Janssen, which is J&J, with $500,000 upfront payment, 7-figure milestone payments potentially down the road per specific target, other 7 figures for non-exclusive targets to expand the number of targets they can go for, and then ultimately possibly 9-figure payments. In addition, We're working with Syngene in India. If you don't know who Syngene is, they're one of the top 10 CDMOs. You probably know the names of Catalent, Patheon, WuXi. They're in the same realm of credibility and working with big pharma. Rubik is a university tied in with Wits University in South Africa. The goal here is to help enable Africa to basically take care of itself. 99% of the vaccines in Africa are produced outside Africa. The goal here is to work with them to develop not only the different vaccines, not just COVID-19, potentially malaria, HIV, etc., and also antibodies, where they can produce them in Africa for their own country in South Africa and for the use across the continent. And then FIBRA, we talked about on the animal health, where we're working together with one of the top 10 animal health companies already. So slide 14 talks about our re-entry, first step back into the industrial world, which we're doing judiciously. We're still focused primarily on animal and human health, but we're taking advantage of opportunities when people come our way where they're looking for a way to make proteins. You may or may not realize that the protein world today is expanding dramatically. People are looking to make food proteins, or looking to make cultured meat proteins for the media to help make cultured meat. And so all those people need to find a way to make proteins. 99% of those companies have no way to make proteins. They raised money, they have ideas, they have gene sequences. We can help turn those into products. We can do it at large scale, we can do it at low cost. And in this particular case, we're doing it with one of the largest food companies, where they're funding up to 3.6 million euros to do the research and development with milestones and commercial payments, and then royalties on the back end. So this is a new slide. This is our targeted business development, what we call core verticals. So here you have the DYA100 vaccine that's based on the existing Wuhan, like everyone else. It's moving, obviously, you know the market's massive. You can see here $60 billion in 2022 is projected. We're going into a phase 1 trial in 2 places. We're moving towards our own phase 1 trial in South Africa with Wits, which we expect to start this fall. And then also in India with a company called Epigen, which received funding from the Indian government recently to do phase 1, phase 2 trials using our technology to make a COVID-19 vaccine. And the goal here is not first and foremost to make a COVID-19 vaccine, it's to use this opportunity to demonstrate safety and efficacy of proteins produced from this platform. Because remember, we were an industrial company for 25 years and we've never put a protein drug in a human being. We've received GRAS, US FDA status, when we're in the industrial side, and in some ways that's even more difficult than getting an approval for a phase 1 trial. We've now run tox studies that showed high safety, but also persistence, potentially longer lasting benefits to protect you from that disease and a COVID-19. In addition, DYAI-101, we have multiple programs going on in discovery, development, in preclinical trials and animal studies with different COVID-19 antigens from Wuhan, alpha, beta, gamma, delta. We've actually run a trivalent, that's 3 proteins in one, and a quadrivalent vaccine. We might be the first people on the planet to have done that. And why? Because we can make a lot of it very quickly, very cheaply, at high purity. And so that would be a pivot for phase 2. We would intend on going from Wuhan to something like Delta and Omicron, which would be a bivalent, or it would be maybe Delta, Omicron, and the next emerging variant. So we'll see how that all plays out. But again, the COVID program from us is really about safety and efficacy of proteins produced from this platform. The next thing you see is influenza. You may recall we did work with Sanofi Pasteur. They demonstrated on their data independently that not only can we produce 100 times more of the antigen of interest, hemagglutinin at that point, compared to baculovirus, which is, remember that cell I mentioned earlier, that they paid $750 million to buy Protein Sciences for that baculovirus platform and that business. And that showed that you could use 1/3 the protein made from our cells versus 3 times the protein from baculovirus, and we got a better result. So we made it cheaper, it performed better, and we had that data. And with Oslo University, we just published a publication in a peer-reviewed journal, I think it was in January, showing the same result. some better immunogenicity, high protection, and survive the challenge. Navillumab, we're going to get into a little later, but Navillumab is the Bristol Myers Squibb product called Opdivo. And so we'll talk about that on its own slide coming up, but we're moving that towards, and when we say active on the right, active means we're out looking for partners to take these into the clinic at their expense in some type of either license agreement with upfront cash, milestones and royalties, or some type of collaborative partnership. The other mAb we're talking about is a COVID-19 mAb. And again, here, just like DY100, this is the first time we're going to be able to potentially get a monoclonal antibody produced from our cell to prove safety and efficacy on an antibody. So we would have covered both ends of the spectrum. We would have had an antigen for vaccines and now an antibody. And that's in a non-human primate study today. And that's being run by our collaborators. This particular antibody covers all the variants. It covers alpha, beta, gamma, delta, and Omicron 1 and 2. So that's moving forward. We're waiting for that result. And once we have that, we'll let you know. Then we're working on another, what's called a FAB. It's potential biosimilar, biobetter. That's a $2 billion potential market, total market by 2024. And then there's a monoclonal antibody, central nervous system, you can see is a potential $6 billion drug in 2026. And that one's not active. We're not looking for a partner. We already have a partner. You might speculate who that might be based on who we have a pharmaceutical deal with, but that's a really huge opportunity, and that potentially could be in the volumes of one of those 9-figure payments if it works out. And again, that would be $100 million plus if we can produce the volume and they have the market size that they project. And then insulin FC, we had worked on a FC insulin. As you know, insulin is one of the largest proteins, maybe the largest, $22 billion market in 2022. And we're actively looking to out-license that. And we actually hit record levels of productivity. And we haven't even begun to push that and push the limits. But it's a great opportunity for us to not only potentially out-license it and raise cash, milestones, and royalties, but to help the world get much lower cost insulin. And that's a long-lasting insulin with the FC. On the animal health, poultry vaccine, infectious disease, big market, 1.8 billion. That's already partnered out. Livestock vaccine, and then the FC insulin for diabetes. This would not be for farm animals in this particular case, and animal health, because animal health is farm animals, which is chicken, pigs, and cattle, but it's also companion animals, which are dogs and cats. And this particular opportunity would be for dogs and cats. But we've demonstrated that we can produce insulin for companion animals. And then nutrition and food, animal-free proteins, big growing market. You've probably heard about all the different things about vegan cheese, that's an example. You've got Impossible Foods. You've got cultured meat, which is like a big emerging market opportunity. Can we actually grow meat in a fermenter? Well, guess what? To grow that meat, you need food. You need proteins. You need things like C1 to be able to produce them in large volumes, low cost, to enable them to make them commercially feasible. And then, of course, we talked about the cannabinoids. We want to out-license that, so we're looking for a partner. That's not something we want to take on our own. We actually just wanted to demonstrate we can make primary metabolites, secondary metabolites, and that wouldn't be for CBD. That would be for rare forms of cannabinoids that you really can't make in a plant in the quantities that you need. And it's certainly with the FDA now ruling about drugs, cannabinoids being drugs, I think we're in the right place at the right time for that. Speaking of the right time and the right platform, is 2 days ago you saw the VRBPAC, which is the Vaccine Research Advisory Panel, approved or recommended for approval the Novavax vaccine 21-0. So what does that mean? It means potentially another option for people that haven't been vaccinated. It means a potential other boost from a recombinant protein vaccine, which would be a heterologous boost. And you say, well, why does that matter to us? Well, I'll tell you why it matters to us, because it's been all about mRNA. And it's really not all about mRNA. Recombinant protein vaccines have been proven for decades to be safe, effective, and protective. We can make a recombinant protein vaccine, for example, in COVID-19, at 100 to 300 times greater yield than baculovirus cells. Novavax used baculovirus cells to make their antigens. So if this is going to be an epidemic or an endemic, we're going to be there. Once we get through phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, either in India and Africa, or we out-license and partner it, which is another goal we're working on after phase 1 safety data and efficacy data, is that we'll be able to make, we believe, a monocomponent, a multi-component, a multivalent, 2, 3, 4, whatever you want in terms of how many different antigens. Remember, the seasonal flu, unlike COVID, is 4 proteins. It's 4 hemagglutinins. We've already made 6 of the antigens here for COVID-19, and we'll be ready for the next emerging one. So we'll be there if it's needed, if it stays as a booster. And, it's projected to, quite frankly, to be a booster and as higher than the seasonal flu in terms of quantities. And for a company our size, that's a massive opportunity. And of course, we can do it affordably, so we can offer it on a global basis. So then you can see from a recombinant protein here that we have a really good opportunity. Lower cost of goods, provide enhanced pricing flexibility, faster production, higher yields, speed up the development, and then of course moving towards our first phase 1 candidate. So I said we're going to talk about Navillumab, and it's important because Navillumab is a cure for cancer. If you remember Scott Gottlieb, the former FDA commissioner in 2018, he had mentioned 2% of the American public has access to biologics with 40% of our prescription drug budget. It's unsustainable in America. It's not even around in anywhere else in the world virtually. You go in 90% of the world, they're not going to be able to afford to get an antibody for cancer. So we need to make a difference. We need to change the game, the paradigm. We're going to do that, and we're starting to do that. And the yields you see here are monumental. 17.2 grams per liter in 7 days on a recent strain we developed for Navillumab. That's very, very high. The average, I think, in the CHO world is somewhere around 4 grams per liter in 14 days. So we can make it in half the time. We can make it at 3 or 4 times the level, and we haven't even pushed the limits yet. But in order to do that, over the last 5 years, we had to remove the protease genes and the sequences in the cells so we can make it stably. And in addition to doing that, we had to glycoengineer the cells to put on human glycan structures. So for the last 5 years, people, well, what have you been doing? We've been removing proteases so we can make protein stably. We've been glycoengineering the cells so that we can make human-like glycans for mAbs. Now, we don't need to make human glycans for antigens for vaccines, so that's prime time being used, ready to go, and transform that industry. And here, when we put the 3 things together, is productivity, stability, and human glycosylation, it becomes the Tesla of the biomanufacturing world. Quicker, faster, more productive. This is going to transform biomanufacturing. I don't believe it's a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And obviously, we want to do it sooner and later, and we're working with companies like J&J, who are funding that, with Janssen and others, funding research and development on top of our own R&D budget to advance this to speed the adoption and use of not only to make antigens for vaccines, but antibodies, bispecifics, trispecifics for human therapeutics. Things like Opdivo, which is our Navillumab, an $8 billion drug. Things like Keytruda, which are pushing $20 billion. Things like Humira, which have already pushed $20 billion. So if we can make these quicker, cheaper, and faster in a global environment, those markets are going to grow, and we're going to bring healthcare to a point that I think the world needs. So again, right time, right platform, Opdivo sales, low cost of goods. One of the things about biosimilars is the market is going to go down. These people all have CHO cells. My CHO cell is better than your CHO cell. Your CHO cell is better than my CHO cell. I can produce 5% more, 10% more. When you get multiple players, the cost of goods is going to go down. The price is going to go down. But guess what? It's not going down incrementally in any large steps. It's not applying Moore's law. We're going to apply Moore's law to biomanufacturing. We're going to drop the cost of manufacturing dramatically so that actually the people that do business with us still have profit margins. So people entering the biosimilar business who have entered it are now realizing they're just chasing a dropping ball. So I think in our case, we're going to be able to withstand the price pressures because we're going to have the lowest cost of goods. We can do it faster, we can do it larger yields at lower cost. And as this slide points out, You've already had 17 biosimilars approved by the FDA since 2015. You've had 60 approved in Europe, and the patent expiration on Navillumab is EU's 2026 and in the US 2028. So the timing to get ready is now. And we're starting to move Navillumab towards preclinical animal studies, and we expect to be able to do that sometime in Q3 or Q4 to start those studies so that we're ready and find a partner to, as we said, where we show active to out-license it. We're already starting to discuss this with big pharma right now, big biotechs. And I think that's my last slide. Any questions by anybody? No questions? Well, thank you very much.